This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
I love people. From my supplier, Kevin, who brings me the chickens, and the delivery guy who delivers the fish, the customers that walk by, seeing happy faces, or better still, turning a sad face around. Kill them with kindness.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The impact of the pandemic forced most hospitality businesses into damage control. For some, life had already thrown a curveball and forced them to consider the impact of monumental change and develop a disaster plan in case it's needed. In some way, that forward thinking allowed them to navigate through the pandemic better than some, but how has it reshaped what they do? Matteo Pignatelli is the owner of Matteo's in Melbourne, Victoria. Matteo, how are you?
Great, Huck. How are you?
Good. Well, how are you feeling at the moment? It's been quite a turbulent year and a half, but Melbourne's starting to open up again. What's the general feeling?
General feeling is excitement, but I think the anxiety here is the lack of staff is a really huge problem. Like, I've never seen it like this. I've been here for 27 years, and we certainly had ups and downs with a shortage of staff or team members or just labour at the moment. We just don't have any people that can open. So we're allowed to open, and they're easing restrictions, but we're not restricted by government now. We get restricted by the lack of personnel, and across the board, and it's across the board in all industries.
What's the situation with the restaurant? What's the plan? There is restrictions still at the moment, but what's your plan?
Plan is to open and service as many people as we can to a standard which we have done so over the last 27 years, in a nutshell. But what has changed significantly is that since I opened, since day one in July 1994, we had traded a 7-day-a-week operation, lunch and dinner, 7 days, which is easier to roster for 7 days rather than 6 days. But the one thing that has changed now, we've gone down to 5 days. We close on the Monday, Tuesday, and I kick myself. I should have done that from day one. It's just so much easier to roster. You just have on the core team with a couple of casuals to fill in the holes on the weekend. And on a bottom line point of view, it's certainly been a lot more, I don't want to say profitable, because, they are also a lot more profitable, but profitable in not just monetary, but mental-wise and amongst the staff. So everyone's happier. They get their full 2 days off. And we found that a lot of the customers that would have come on a Monday, Tuesday are coming on the Wednesday, Thursday. So I really do kick myself, and I think, well, maybe I should have done that sooner.
Well, tell us about that hesitancy all those years ago. It's not uncommon. Most restaurants felt the need to be open as much as possible in order to make a profit, but this has sort of changed the model a bit. What sort of impact do you think this change will happen, and why do you think hospitality used to think like that?
Well, it used to think like that, and some people still think like that because, and even more so now, because of the rents. And on a Monday, Tuesday, they're thinking it's idle, and they need to have some turnover to basically contribute to the fixed overheads. the problem is, though, is what I found is you're diluting your customer base over 7 days rather than condensing them into the 5-day period. Having said that, if you could fill up, if I had a small restaurant where I fit, under 50 people, I probably would need to open on a Friday, 7 days to recoup some revenue. But I've got a 200-seater restaurant, so it really is. But having said that, the bigger the restaurant, the more rent you pay normally, so the more justification to open the 7 days.
Matteo's has been around for a long time. But take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play for you and your family as a kid? Well,
I grew up my parents had a pizza, fish and chip shop in Westgarth, very trendy area at the moment. You're down here in the inner north of Victoria or of Melbourne. And there were 5 kids in the family, and I was on the pizzas with Dad, and I had a brother on the roast chickens. I had a sister on the hamburgers, and I had another sister on the fish and chips. So we grew up around food all the time. And I always laugh and say, when I want to retire and slow down, and I'll buy a pizza shop. But looks like some people have beat me to it in Sydney and in Melbourne. Because I don't know if there's Matteo Pizza in Sydney now. We have a Matteo's Pizza Parlour. They've just opened up another one in Melbourne and in Hyatt. There's a Matteo's Delicatessen in Footscray. It's pretty cute, actually, although I do get a lot of people ringing up asking to order a takeaway sandwich or a pizza, and you've got to say to them, no, the wrong Matteo's. But when I started in those years, when I bought the restaurant, it used to be the original Mietta's here, which is quite famous. So, obviously, I piggybacked off her old brand. It was Mietta's come Matteo's, and it was a smart thing to do. But nowadays, I always mentor some young kids, and I say to them, whatever you do, do not put your name on the window. It is the worst decision you could do. But, live and learn.
Tell us about that. Why not put the name on the window?
Well, think about places like Jacques Ramon's, Stephanie's, because it's hard to sell the business with your name on the door because people associate it with a person and goodwill to that person. So it's much harder. Brown's restaurant was another one. So, but it's funny because with us or with Matteo's North Fitzroy, people would walk in and say, oh, hi, and especially now with all the COVID check-ins and all that, and I'll tell them I'm hi, Matteo, and they go, oh, you got the same name as the restaurant? And I say, yeah, it's actually my restaurant. And I don't realise that there's actually a person, so that the name has gone beyond the person and become its own standalone brand. That makes sense.
Tell us about those early days. You mentioned Mietta's, an absolute icon of Melbourne and Australia's culinary landscape. What was it like for you all those years ago and the challenges you had opening up?
So it was actually pretty easy to open up a restaurant in those days, and it's very different nowadays. The landscape is very different, the culture, the work ethic, everything's very different. So I was actually studying accounting, and I have to say it's been the secret to my success is to look at numbers. But I was studying accounting. My mother was working at a restaurant in Carlton called Masani's, which is still there. And I went and picked her up one day, and I said, he said to me, what do you do on the weekends? And I thought, no idea, just not do much. He said, do you want to come and work behind a bar? I'd never worked in a restaurant before. I still remember one of the waiters came up, and I was just helping out behind the bar, and he said, I'll have a G&T. And I said, what's a G&T? I honestly didn't know, and I think about it now, I think how embarrassing. And in those days at Masani, so I was on the floor and Guy Grossi was in the kitchen. That's still going at Masani. So that's right. I remember one week during Christmas we had a competition, Guy and I, who could do the most hours. And that week I did 95 hours and the Guy did 98 hours, but he cheated because he actually slept in the car park. So And that's hard to imagine. If you think about to do 98 hours in a week, you'd have to be there at 6 and you're there till 2. And that's exactly what happened. We loved it. We had the best time. And the little team we had doesn't happen nowadays. You wouldn't do it anyway. We certainly don't do it. I freak out when someone doesn't have their full 2 days off. So, but there were lots of people around. It was really all the waiters were real waiters. When I say real waiters, not that they're real waiters now, but there was a profession, and they made a living at it. You know, they bought, and I see them now, and they've bought a couple of properties in those days. Admittedly, properties were a lot cheaper than in those days. But I was at Masani's, and I was looking around, and I thought, oh, there's got to be more to this. I always had a desire to learn more, and so I thought I'll go enroll at William Angliss, and I did William Angliss in the city here, Centre of Excellence, and they had a new diploma course which I enrolled for, thinking it was part-time because it was only 25 hours contact. And I thought, okay, I could do that and I could work at the same time. You know, I'm used to doing 90 hours a week, so soon I dropped out of that and when I worked at Guy Grossi's new restaurant. My wife was a sous chef there. And we went out to Glen Waverley. We did a little stint that was around about the GFC time. So, and then we wanted to move in closer to the city. It was funny when we opened up this restaurant in Glen Waverley, it's called Fideli's. I think it's still there actually. And we used to serve garlic bread. There was gingham tablecloths on the table. It was, and I remember saying to the owners, because I was only a minor shareholder, I said to the owners, we've got to get rid of this garlic bread. It's just too, and these were 89, 90. And I remember him saying to me, Matteo, how about we do a deal? The money we take and make on garlic bread, that could be your wages. And I thought, oh, and I looked at the numbers and I thought, wow, okay, we're keeping the garlic breads. But then certainly when we looked at buying Mietas here, it was a friend of mine had it because it was Mietas. Between Mietas and myself, there was 9 years, 7 owners. Right, because it was on the north side of Alexander Parade, everyone that was taking over was losing money and trying to put things on the menu, thinking that the bohemian customer base of the other side of Brunswick Street would spill over. And so when I bought it, it was a pizza shop actually, and I thought I'll buy it. And also I had all the original Mietas furniture, the credenzas, had a pizza oven, and I had an exit plan or an exit strategy before I had an actual business plan. I thought I'd buy it, sign on the lease. If it doesn't work, I'll just sell all the furniture, and it was all antique. It was beautiful furniture that Tony Knox had bought over the years, and sell that, and I'll just break even. But I remember my first review our first review, so I had Franca in the kitchen doing traditional Italian food with a modern twist. I remember our first review was by Jeff Slattery. He did a magazine, I forget what it's called now. And he said, oh, everything's great, but it's on the wrong side of the street. You know, I'll give it till Christmas. But, and 27 years later, I look at that every now and then. I say, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so, but we evolved, So when we started a family, Franco had to leave the kitchen, got a new chef, basically a brilliant chef. I must say he was really good. I think he's back in Sydney. I don't know where he is now, but he was like a walking LaRousse. And he would come up with dishes that were brilliant. So, and every couple of years I would change chefs anyway, because I never wanted the restaurant to be associated with a chef. because I'd seen it happen too long when they move, that the restaurant would go down, or there'd be a downturn in business. So I always try to associate the brand or the Matteos with a feeling rather than people in particular. And our philosophy has always been it's about the customer, not about me or the chef or any particular waiter. And that's how we've kind of built it along the way. So we're not, even though we're a little bit of egotists, we're not really egotists.
Well, tell us about that feeling. 27 years is extraordinary for a restaurant, but what is it about Matteo's? What is it that you deliver that's so focused on the customer?
The philosophy we had at the beginning was, I used to watch that show Cheers, where you come in and everybody knows your name. And that's what it is. There's a lot of people doing really good food at the moment. And I like to say that the restaurant has a personality, and the personality is that of welcoming, value, friendly, professional service is what I call it. You come in, we accommodate any request you have. We have a saying, if we've got the ingredients, you have the time and prepared to pay accordingly, we'll do anything for you. Because we're in, and that's what I think sometimes, even when I go out, people forget we're in hospitality. It's about the customer. Not everyone. Now I think people are starting to realise, and that's a trend I've seen in Sydney. People used to say years ago it was all very arrogant and was that new, but the last few times, I go to Sydney quite a bit, it's great to see that they've flipped that, and now it's all about that hospitality and generosity, and it's all about perceived generosity as well. And it doesn't, as long as they feel that they're getting value for money and they're happy, I think that's what all it is. It's nothing, and the food's good, honest food. We're not trying to do tricky stuff, and we try to push the boundaries a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's got to be tasty. It's got to be hot when it's meant to be hot, and it's not too out there. There's a lot of people doing that as well, and good on them. I think I get excited by that, but it's not my business model.
3 decades is extraordinary. What have been some of the highlights over those decades?
I think the highlights for me personally is when I see people that have worked here and trained and have gone on and done great things. And to me, that's like a pat on the back, saying you have contributed to the industry, and that's what I try to do, in a way that I've only ever had the one restaurant. I've never had the desire to do 2 restaurants, and to contribute, I've done other things, like I was sat on the council with Restaurant and Catering Association. I was even president for a few years, so I did that. Then also I'm pretty passionate about training in industry, and now having gone to William Anglis, I sit on the board as well as the industry representative, trying to influence some change in the way the curriculum's done, and that's been really good. And just watching the kids come through that and trying to promote to other industry people that we need to send kids to school. We can't just ask for qualified people. We need to take on trainees. And every time I see a restaurateur or a chef, or I say to them, "Oh, how many trainees do you have?" It's our role or our obligation to train these people, and you can't expect to just pick and choose qualified people out there. You need to invest in training. It's so important. Training, and not only training, development. Taking people to the next level.
The pandemic has forced many hospitality businesses into damage control, but you were thrown a pretty huge curveball quite a few years ago and created a disaster plan. Can you tell us about that time?
Yeah, so about survived a couple of disaster plans. We had the gas crisis, which we got through. We had the GFC, which we got through. But the biggest one was about 5-6 years ago now. I remember having a bit of a sniffle. I just got back from overseas, actually. I'd been away for a little break. I got back, had a bit of a stuffy nose, and I thought I had a bit of a cold, but it turned out it was a lymphoma. So I went to the ENT. The guy stuck his camera up there, and it was actually a cancer. And initially it wasn't much of a shock, but when he said to me, "Oh, you've got a 50-50 chance of survival," and I'm thinking, is that a lot? Is that high? Is that low? I wasn't even sure about it. But what really made the problem sink through was when, because I had income protection, and I had a trauma insurance, which my accountant put me. When the trauma insurance guy said, "Yep, no worries, check's in the mail," and they only give that to you when it's pretty serious and you're going to die, more or less. So I started treatment with chemo and radiotherapy. But more importantly, what I was doing was I was setting up the restaurant to clean everything up, make sure all debts were paid. I had formed another company. I was going to do some outside catering and delivery. I was going to set up ghost kitchens all those years ago. And a company called Tuk Kitchen, which I still have the company. And so basically I put all my affairs in order, thinking if I died, it sounds a bit drastic, but exactly what it was. If I died, there was no burden for the family, the wife and kids, and literally had everything all set up. And then when COVID came, it was like, yeah, is that the best you got? It hit me harder than that, you know. And luckily I am in remission, in a good news, you know. I'm in remission, and I think I'll die of psoriasis before I die of any cancer or anything. But I don't think you get liver poisoning with Grand Cru Burgundy, though, do you? Or...
What sort of impact did that have on you personally and your commitment to the hospitality sector?
It's a good question, in that it really changed the way I looked at things. You know, it was when I got sick. Funnily enough, when I got sick, I had a brilliant young shepherd. He might have been on your show, actually, Buddha Lowe. He was such a good kid. He was passionate, and he was doing, I think, some of the best food we'd ever done, and it was very clever and still tasty. So, but I remember thinking how we lost the hat in those days, because the hats were a big thing, you know, the Good Food Guide, and we always had 2 hats for years and years. Funnily enough, we made more money when we lost hats, but, you know, hey, that's another story in itself. That's another hour if you ever have one. And I saw how upset he was, and I thought, when we lost it, and I think it was because when you change chefs, say they take a hat off for whatever reason, and I was really upset for him, and I thought, it's not that important. And that's also, I was having treatment, you know, I was knocking on heaven's door, or it might have been hell's door, and really focused was on everyone being happy. I know it sounds really, you know, wanky, but, you know, I wanted all my customers to leave the door happy. What's going to make you happy? What do you want that will make you happy? Not what will make me happy, because that's what will make me happy. You know, the chips are cold. No problem. I'll get you some more chips. So all of a sudden, because I'm sure it was the stress that gave me the cancer in the first place, and so it really flipped. And you realize, you put everything into perspective about what is important in life, and really tried to enjoy a bit more time with my family, tried to make sure that the staff were happier as well, what made them happy. I think that's when we cut the hours as well. You got to think, in those days, I was running it like the what's that TV show on SAS? So the restaurant was run a bit like SAS. It was all old school, When people would watch that Gordon Ramsay show, Boiling Point, I go, yeah, what's the problem? Isn't that normal? Or not that it was ever that bad here, but and I realised that it didn't have to be like that. So, and that's where it all changed. Priorities changed, but still always about quality and value and customer satisfaction.
The pandemic landed and you were prepared in some ways for it with a disaster plan. What sort of impact has it had on what you do, though, apart from changing your hours and things like that?
To be honest, I don't think it has had much of an impact. I spent most of the lockdown, we didn't do any takeaway. It just, to be honest, it wasn't something I was interested in. More what I was interested in was to making sure that the team were looked after, they were okay. And once I sorted them out, because I was okay, I'm not going to lie, I was okay. I set myself up a few years before for something a lot worse. So this was kind of nothing, it was like a nosebleed. But I wanted to make sure that during the lockdown that the staff were all okay, and I looked after them, and I would, as a habit, come into work every day, literally either walk and as a point, I would try to ring at least one restaurateur or one colleague a day just to check in on them, how you going, help them fill in their forms, because you'd be surprised how many, because it was too hard, they wouldn't do. And I said, no, you can do this, you can do that, and just talk them through that. And to me, that was great. That was much satisfying, or as satisfying as serving a customer and them leaving happy. So it was quite it was nice, and all those people appreciated it, and it's great how I think it's brought the industry closer together. Though now that with the staff shortage, you're all trying to steal staff from each other, it's just a bit brings out the worst in people.
You mentioned staffing, but what are some of the opportunities to come out of this situation where the hospitality can shine a light on itself and be better?
The industry, and I've always said it, needed to change. Unfortunately, the government's trying to corporatise the industry, which I don't think is the right way to go, because we are in the hospitality business industry because we don't want to be in a corporate business. Can we be more professional? 100%. And we need to be more professional and a bit more compliant. But moving forward, I'm thinking what COVID's brought. So I think we do need to do more training. One thing which I think an opportunity that has arisen, and I'm working on it at the moment with some restaurateurs, is tapping in to the senior mature market that have either left the industry or have retired, to come back in and train the young kids who are coming up, who I'm inspired by some of these young kids that want to learn. 16, 17-year-olds want to learn, but there's no one to teach them. So I'm working on a marketing campaign where putting it out there to guys that have changed the industry or even have retired, just coming in, do a couple of shifts in their favourite restaurant. It doesn't even have to be here. Just ring up your local restaurant that is willing to tap into your preserved skills, so to speak, and train and give back and really teach them what old hospitality or real hospitality is like. I'll let you know how that goes, by the way. Well, not that there's no one else, but honestly, there's an untapped market there, as are the mums, the stay-at-home mums, and I'm not saying their parents, but predominantly their mums who were chefs or in the industry who were great at their jobs, but because some businesses haven't been able to get their head around innovative rostering about tapping into this, resource that is out there, that although and it is, and you have to work around them because obviously if they've got kids and it's important, but it's easy to do. Just be a little bit more innovative, and I think it will work for them.
You've run one of Australia's best restaurants for a long time now. What is it that you love about what you do?
I love people. I love, from my supplier, who, Kevin, who brings me the chickens, and the delivery guy who delivers the fish, the customers that walk by, who rung me during lockdown that said, "Oh, is everything okay? Just checking in on you." And just seeing, I think you probably hear it all the time, seeing happy faces. Or better still, turning a sad face around. Kill them with kindness is another saying we have. And some people you just can't turn them around. So if you can get a 95% strike rate. But I do love these small artisan, bespoke little restaurants opening up here and there that are doing amazing stuff. And it really is great because we are being consumed by larger groups who, having said that, they're doing a great job as well. They run very professionally, but you lose that personal artisan sometimes because they're trying to do something that is a lot more conservative.
There's some amazing food around at the moment. How do you see the future of the Australian culinary landscape moving forward, and what are you expecting to see?
What I'm worried I'm seeing is that a lot of food is being bought in pre-prepared, pre-filleted, like you put on an apprentice, fillet of fish. Oh, is that what a whole fish looks like? Oh, is that how a big carcass looks? And it's all been driven by labour cost and shortage of labour. So nowadays you buy everything portioned, everything cleaned, because even though you pay a higher food cost on it, there's a lower labour cost on it. It's all... But every now and then, there's little pockets of guys and girls just doing some great stuff and tasty, interesting. I'm just blown away sometimes the things you say, I go, I've never thought about that. But I have noticed everything is going back to basics. Everything's turned around. There's nothing's piled up anymore. You're getting away from, smears and all those trends that have come and gone.
Melbourne's just opening up again. What's it feel like for you opening the doors again and welcoming back the regulars?
It feels good. For me personally, it feels like I've had a little bit of a rest. We've been able to recharge, and there's a sense of enthusiasm. We were worried about this problem about making sure when people came in that they're double vaxxed, that there would be some resistance. There hasn't been much of that, or hasn't been any, to be honest, at the moment. Most people are understanding and appreciative of the fact that we have been closed. And the other thing they're very aware of, which is refreshing, is that produce has gone up so much that they understand that we need to charge maybe a little bit more to cover the costs, really, more than anything. But what I'm worried about is not charging too much, because while there's going to be an initial spike in people coming back, I have a feeling that in July, August, September next year, people are going to be leaving the country. They're all going to be going to Europe, so there's going to be a bit of a ghost town in Melbourne, and I wonder whether it'll be in Sydney as well. So we don't want to be burning people now while the demand is there, because next year people aren't going to forget. And so we're happy to help you out, but think about us next year as well.
What are you most looking forward to as we move beyond this sort of period that's had such an impact on the industry? I'm
looking forward to people resetting the way they think about training and the importance of training, the importance of development, the importance of customer service. I think that's what I'm really looking for, because I think it will be a little bit different. People will be will be much more efficient the way they run their businesses as well. But hopefully they'll be a lot more appreciative of the customers walking in the door, which, and I think that's where I'm looking forward. And I'm looking forward to catching up with my friends, been talking to them on the phone and just seeing how they're going. And I certainly wouldn't be doing it now, because I'm pretty sure they'd be all hands-on, trying to fill in holes until it all opens up again and we get all staffed up again.
Well, Matteo, I know there's so much to talk about. We're very honoured to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a bit of your story. Looking forward to hearing more about your approach on attacking the staff shortages. So please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Great, Huck. And then thank you for, reaching out and talking to people and hearing different people's stories. And there are some similarities. I think I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts, and I think it's really inspiring, and sometimes it helps people to talk about their issues. So thank you.
Keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Good on you, buddy.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.